Soviet Union. Center of socialism or for some communism. The establishment of the Soviet Union, which managed to be the stronghold of the left for almost 70 years, dates back to 1917. With the participation of the Russian Empire in the First World War in 1914, Germany, Austria-Hungary, and the Ottoman state entered into the border conflicts. The Russians, who lost land against Germany in the west until 1917, seized the Ottoman states Trabzon, Rize, Erzurum, Bitlis, Muş, Van, and Hakkari cities in the south. But by 1917, the communists, who called themselves Bolsheviks, launched a movement against the autocracy, that is, a one-man regime that held all political powers alone and was not subject to any judgment against the law. The aim of this uprising was to overthrow the bourgeois government and to establish a socialist state representing the workers and peasants into place. At the head of this movement was Vladimir Lenin, a world-renowned name. On October 10, 1917, the Bolsheviks decided to revolt against Russian rule under Lenin. The head of Russian Empire, Tsar Nicholas II, lost control of the army in the face of this uprising and was forced to abdicate. The Russian Empire, with this revolution, the anti-war Bolshevik decided to withdraw from the First World War completely in 1917. While the Russians transferred the lands they received from the Ottoman Empire to the Armenian and Georgian rebels, later Armenia, Georgia, and Azerbaijan were established in this region. On the other hand, Finland, which was under Russian control, and Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia, which came under the control of Germany, benefited from the chaos created by the October Revolution, declared their independence one after another in 1918. A year later, Ukraine declared its independence from Russia by establishing an independent socialist government. Thus, the number of countries that gained independence by acquiring land from Russia became 8. Until 1921, while the internal disturbance in Russia continued throughout the country, the Bolsheviks eventually succeeded in gaining authority in all of Russia by emerging victories from the civil war. Now it was time to decide on federal structure of the new state to be established. Joseph Stalin, the People's Committee of Nationalities, argued that all republics should be autonomous within the Russian Soviet Socialist Republic, while Lenin strongly opposed this and advocated a federation plan in which all republics had equal status and the right to seat whenever they wanted. In the end, while what Lenin said in the formation of federation, this event is considered to be the first disagreement between Lenin and Stalin. On December 30, 1922, the Soviet Union was officially established with the union of Russian Federative Soviet Socialist Republic with the Belarusian SSR, the Ukrainian SSR, the Central Asian and Caucasian republics. The Soviet Union under Lenin decided to support all socialist parties in the world for the spread of socialist revolutions. While this goal was responded in some countries such as Mongolia and China, it received a positive response in some countries such as Turkey and India for common purposes. Lenin, whose health deteriorated since May 1922, wrote a will and talked about the danger of a leadership conflict. Emphasizing that Joseph Stalin was a dangerous-minded person, Lenin also recommended that Stalin's power be narrowed if he was elected leader. Paralyzed in 1923 and unable to speak, Lenin died on January 21, 1924. For a while after Lenin's death, Joseph Stalin and Leon Trotsky fought for the Soviet throne. In 1927, Stalin won, while Leon Trotsky, known as the founder of the Red Army, was exiled from the Soviet Union. In 1927, when Stalin's absolute power was passed in the Soviet Union, many innovations were made in the economic field. In the first 5-year plan, 210,000 agricultural farms and 6,000 agricultural stations were established in the Soviet Union, which took an attack especially in the fields of industry and agriculture. 500,000 tractors were made available at these stations. During the second 5-year plan, launched in 1933, 4,500 factories and energy facilities were built and put into service in the Soviet Union. During the period of the third 5-year plan, between 1938 to 1941, nearly 3,000 industrial facilities were established. Thus, In the period before the Second World War, around 9,000 large-scale industrial facilities were brought to the Soviet economy. By the end of 1940, the heavy industrial production of the Soviet Union had reached 12 times in 20 years. With the Germans gradually attacking the countries around him in 1938, Stalin, considering every possibility, signed a non-aggression agreement with Germany in 1939. This agreement was signed by Stalin to ensure the security of his country against the Nazi threat. It was an opportunity for Hitler to launch an attack on Poland and France. In 1939, the republics of Bessarabia, Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia joined the Soviet Union under Stalin's compulsion. With the German attack on Poland, Soviet Russia also recaptured the lands that formerly belonged to Belarus and left to Poland, and the western borders of the Soviet Union took its final shape. Thus, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics became a state consisting of 15 Union republics. Although Germany signed a non-aggression pact in 1939, it launched a sudden attack on the Soviet Union on 22 June 1941 without declaring war. The Russians, who were quote unprepared for this attack called Operation Barbarossa, had to withdraw at first. Stalin, who didn't make enough preparations despite the Soviet generals' warning that they should not trust Hitler, was shocked by his sudden attack. With the support of Catholics and former land-rich families in western Ukraine, the Germans soon reached Moscow and Leningrad. The German army, which plundered 32,000 large and small-scale industrial enterprises in the places they passed, attacked Moscow with the order of Hitler. Failing to capture Moscow despite the successive attacks, Hitler turned to the city of Stalin, named after Stalin. Despite his complete siege of Stalingrad by the German army, it was not handed over to Germans thanks to its lifelong defense, primarily by soldiers from the Turkish republics under the uniform of the Red Army. The German army, whose strength began to weaken after this unsuccessful operation, could not hold on to a Red Army and retreated to Poland. After the Red Army managed to expel the Nazis from Soviet territory, it liberated all Eastern Europe from Poland from Nazi occupation. Stalin then ordered the Red Army to advance to Berlin. The fall of Berlin in May 1945. The Second World War ended, and the Soviet Union took the winning side. While the destruction of the war was dire for the Soviet people, the Soviet Union suffered 27 million losses from differing nationalities, mostly Russians. Civilian losses exceeded military losses as large cities were heavily bombarded. The economy was hit up hard by the destruction of industrial zones and the decline in agricultural production. Socialist parties that resisted the Nazi occupation in Europe during the war came to power in Czechoslovakia, Bulgaria, Hungary, Yugoslavia, Albania, East Germany, Poland, and Romania with the support of Soviet Union and established Socialist People's Republic in these countries. In the Far East, again with the support of the Soviets, China and North Korea's orientation towards socialism were important developments in terms of the security and the alliance of the country that was besieged before the war. However, the concern of the US and its allies about the spread of the communism and the implementation of Marshall Plan caused international tension. In addition, the military alliances of the US and Western Europe against the Soviet Union with the North Atlantic Treaty called NATO in 1949 created a new threat of the war in the world. In the early 50s, despite the devastation caused by the war, the Soviet government ensured the recovery of the country's economy with the Fourth Five-Year Plan. In the 1950s, with the effect of planned economic and technological advances, a better level was reached in industrial development and agricultural production than before the war. As the Soviet Union began to heal the wounds of the war, Joseph Stalin, at the age of 74, was suddenly paralyzed and died on March 5 in 1953. Although Stalin transformed the Soviet Union into an industrial and military superpower throughout his leadership, the harsh and repressive policies he implemented in doing so caused the deaths of millions of Soviet citizens. During his dictatorship, nearly 20 million people, half of whom were from the Turkish republics, died due to the labor camps, forced land reforms, famine, and extrajudicial executions. With the sudden death of Stalin, who shocked the Soviet people, the struggle for power began in the country. On September 7, 1953, while Nikita Khrushchev was appointed as the General Secretary of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. Khrushchev in his speech claimed that Stalin had made mistakes and started the anti-Stalinism campaign. Although Khrushchev decided to compromise with the Western states in foreign policy, he established the Warsaw Pact in 1955 against the NATO alliances led by the USA. During the Khrushchev era, the USSR became one of the two superpowers in the world with great achievements in economy, science, and technology. When the first satellite named Sputnik was launched in 1957, Yuri Gagarin named his name in history as the first man to go to the space in 1961. The Soviet Union proved to be one step ahead of the United States with its achievements in space technology. Besides these achievements of USSR, communism was spreading rapidly abroad. The proclamation of socialism in Cuba in 1959 under the leadership of Fidel Castro showed that the ideology reached the doors of the United States. America's deployment of nuclear missile launchers in Turkey against the Soviet Union increased tensions. The Soviet Union sent nuclear missile launchers to Cuba in response to this action. With the American awareness of the situation, Cuba was blocked from the sea, and it was announced that Soviet ships would not be allowed to cross into Cuba. While America and the Soviet Union were so close to a hot war, this crisis was overcome in a short time after two-sided common sense call. After this period, the Soviet Union started to experience some political problems despite scientific, technical, and economic advances. The Khrushchev's appointment to critical roles without the approval of the party board began to draw attention day by day. In addition, despite the increase in agriculture production, revenue did not meet the needs of the rapidly growing population. For this reason, the import of some agricultural products, especially wheat, increased. All these problems caused opposition to Khrushchev in the party. The party's ideological official Mikhail Suslov suggested that Khrushchev had abused his powers and that his criticism of Stalin had turned into personal hostility. On this proposal, the party leadership dismissed Khrushchev from the position of General Secretary of the Soviet Union in October 1964. On October 14, 1964, Leonid Brezhnev was appointed as the General Secretary of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. The economic reforms carried out during the Brezhnev period brought positive results, and the Soviet Union became one of the two superpowers of the world economically in this period. As the urban population increased, the cultural level increased, and the literacy rate reached 100%. According to World Bank data, in 1970 the ratio of Soviets to education expenditure to the country's budget was 7%. Considering that this rate was around 5-6% in G7 countries today, we understand how much importance the Soviet Union attached to education. On the other hand, the fact that Vietnam and some African countries took the Soviet Union's development as an example and preferred communism brought the USA and the Soviets against each other many times. The independence movement against French colonialism, especially in Vietnam, caused the USA to occupy the country. The Viet Cong guerrillas in the north of the country were financially supported by the Soviet Union and other socialist countries. The absolute victory of North Vietnam in 1975 struck a blow to America's reputation and led the USSR to increase its prestige in the international arena. Despite this, thanks to Brezhnev's persistent policy of continuing Lenin's peace policy, disarmament treaties were signed with the United States. However, these agreements caused the deterioration of relations with Cuba. The request of Cuban leader Castro, who asked for new weapons from the Soviet Union against the threat of American invasion, was rejected by Brezhnev for financial reasons. After that, relations between the Soviet Union and Cuba could not go beyond the commercial exchanges. By the 1970s, the Soviet Union was at the height of its power. The Soviets, which started the space age and entered the space race with the United States, sent the first spacecraft to send data from another planet to Earth to the planet Venus. While a 43% increase was achieved in industrial production between 1971 and 1975, a special emphasis was placed on energy and fuel production. During this period, the Soviets became the world's largest producer and exported in such areas as coal, iron, steel, oil, and cement. During this period, national income growth amounted to 27%. Also, with this economic policy, the average monthly wage of workers and civil servants increased by more than 50%. While all expenses for free education, free healthcare, free municipal services, scholarships, and kindergarten covered by the state, the real income of the people has increased by another 40%. During the Brezhnev period, the influence of Soviet Union on foreign policy was gradually increasing. In 1978, socialists came to power in Afghanistan and the Democratic Republic of Afghanistan was established. However, organizations such as the Taliban, which were owned by the United States in 1979, started a civil war in the country. The socialist government, whose power was in jeopardy, sought help from the Soviet Union and the Red Army entered Afghanistan. However, due to the financial burden of the intervention in Afghanistan, although it caused the formation of an opposition movement in the country, the period of stability continued in the country in general. The death of old leader Brezhnev on November 10, 1982, led to the beginning of a period in the USSR in which the leaders changed frequently. Andropov was brought to the vacant party seat. However, after Andropov died in February 1984, Konstantin Chernenko was replaced. When Chernenko also sat in the seat for only 1 year and died in March 1985, Mikhail Gorbachev was appointed as the head of the Soviet Union. After Gorbachev came to power, he took steps to make many changes in the Soviet Union. But these steps set the stage for events that will lead to this disintegration of the USSR within 6 years. The new secretary first revised the party leadership, purging most of the Brezhnev-era members. The party administration meeting in 1986 accepted the principle of transparency in the political field. However, this led to an increase in nationalist feelings in non-Russian republics due to the separatist propaganda of the Western media infiltrating these regions. In 1990, East Germany, under the control of Soviet Union, was allowed to unite with West Germany. In 1990, as a result of the anti-communist propaganda initiated by the Western states in the socialist public republics in Eastern Europe, it caused the fall of socialist powers one by one. This event began to shake the Soviet Union economically, which had trade agreements with socialist countries. In the same year, with the transition to a free market economy in the USSR, the liberalization of prices caused the prices of basic food products to rise rapidly and could not meet even the basic needs of the people. The economic collapse, as a result of wrong policies, led to further increase in nationalist demands. The first revolt began in March 1990 when the Baltic country Lithuania declared its secession, and this independence movement was prevented by the intervention of the Red Army against Lithuania. With the reform made in 1990, the General Secretary position was abolished and the presidential system was adopted, while the multi-party system was also adopted. Mikhail Gorbachev was elected president of the Soviet Union, while opponent Boris Yeltsin was elected the president of the Russian Soviet Socialist Republic. On August 19, 1991, the army led by the KGB chairman Vladimir Khrushchev attempted a military coup against the Russian Socialist Republic. While the military coup was spread in a short time, this coup event caused Boris Yeltsin to increase his popularity. With the deepening of the political crisis in September 1991, the 8 socialist states that made up the Soviet Union declared their separation from the Union one by one. The president of the Soviet Union, Mikhail Gorbachev, who thought that political unity was now impossible, announced that he had resigned from his post on December 25, 1991. The Union of Soviet Socialist Republic was officially dissolved on December 25, 1991, when the red flag, which was flying in the Kremlin at night, was lowered and replaced by the Russian flag. See you in the next video. Bye now.